Sensory hook, the morning after. You wake before the alarm, not because you feel rested, but because the night seems to have ended without ever really beginning. Your eyes feel heavy, your mouth is dry. For a moment you stay still, hoping another few minutes might somehow repair what the night did not give you. You sit on the edge of the bed, your feet touch the floor, and even that familiar movement feels slightly different. You reach for your phone almost automatically, squinting at the screen while your mind takes a little longer than usual to catch up. In the kitchen, everything looks exactly as it did yesterday. The cup is where you left it. The coffee smells the same. But you do not quite feel the same. You may notice that your balance is a little less certain, your patience a little shorter, or your thoughts harder to organize. Simple decisions suddenly require more effort. You tell yourself, reasonably enough, that you are simply tired, and perhaps you are. But there is something else happening that you cannot see in the mirror or feel with your fingertips. While you were awake through those lost hours, several systems inside your body were already responding to the absence of sleep. Your brain, your hormones, your metabolism, your cardiovascular system, even parts of your immune system do not simply wait until morning. They respond, quietly and continuously, through the night, while the house is still quiet, long before you notice or feel it coming. The changes may be temporary, but they are real, and they begin before the first sip of coffee reaches your lips, while the house is still quiet. And that feeling of exhaustion is only the part you can notice. What is happening underneath the surface is considerably more interesting than simply feeling tired that morning. Curiosity gap and question lock. But that feeling of exhaustion is only the part you can notice. What is happening underneath the surface is considerably more interesting than simply feeling tired. After one night without adequate sleep, what actually changes inside your body? The obvious answer seems simple. You lose energy. But that explanation is incomplete. This is not merely a matter of feeling sluggish, and it is certainly not a test of willpower. You may have been told that one bad night is either completely harmless or devastating. Neither extreme tells you much about what your body is actually doing today. One sleepless night does not automatically mean permanent damage. Your body is remarkably capable of responding to temporary disruption and beginning the process of recovery. And here is the part almost nobody talks about. Many of the tools involved in that recovery are not exotic. They are already built into your biology. You do not need an expensive machine, a shelf full of supplements, or a complicated morning ritual to understand the first steps. Your brain already has systems naturally for regulating sleep pressure. Your hormones already follow daily rhythms. Your cardiovascular system already adjusts between activity and rest. But you cannot understand what helps until you understand what was interrupted. Sleep is doing far more than giving you permission to close your eyes. It is coordinating processes involving your brain, hormones, metabolism, heart, blood vessels, and immune system. Remove one night from that process, and the effects begin to spread through several connected systems. The real question, then, is not simply why you feel tired. It is what your body has been trying to manage while you were awake. Before explaining what that lost night actually changes, there is something worth clearing up about the way sleep advice is usually presented online. Anti-influencer credibility firewall. That is exactly where sleep advice can become confusing, because the loudest message is not always the most accurate one. You have probably seen claims that one sleepless night wrecks your hormones, damages your brain, spikes your cortisol, and leaves you needing a special supplement or complicated recovery protocol. That version of the story is dramatic. It is also far too simple. Sleep has become surrounded by expensive gadgets, celebrity routines, supplements, wearable scores, and warnings that can make an ordinary bad night sound like a medical emergency. You are told to fear blue light, track every minute of sleep, buy another device, or follow someone else's morning routine as though your body cannot recover without outside intervention. I find that kind of advice frustrating because it often gives you the conclusion without showing you the biology. The version most people hear is this: one sleepless night wrecks your hormones and your brain. But what the science actually shows is more careful. Acute sleep loss can produce measurable changes in brain function, stress signaling, metabolism, cardiovascular regulation, and immune activity. Those changes are real, but real does not automatically mean permanent. That distinction matters. Acute sleep deprivation means you have temporarily lost sleep. Chronic sleep deprivation means the problem is repeated, night after night. Those are not biologically identical situations, and treating them as though they are can create unnecessary fear. Your cortisol, for example, is not simply an alarm chemical that gets destroyed when you miss sleep. Cortisol is part of a carefully timed hormonal rhythm that helps regulate alertness, metabolism, and your response to stress. Sleep disruption can alter that rhythm. Your body notices. But that does not mean your hormonal system has been permanently broken. The same principle applies to your brain. After insufficient sleep, attention and decision-making can become less reliable. Reaction times can slow. Emotional control can change. Yet those findings do not mean that one difficult night has permanently damaged your brain. And this is where it gets interesting. The real science does not need fear, mysticism, or marketing. It is fascinating on its own because your body is constantly adjusting to changes in sleep, wakefulness, light, food, movement, and stress. Once you understand those adjustments, the morning after a sleepless night stops looking like a mysterious failure. It becomes a biological sequence you can actually follow. And once you see this channel's approach, the goal becomes much simpler. Understand what the body is doing before deciding what you should do about it. Soft CTA number 1. And once you see this channel's approach, the goal becomes much simpler. Understand what the body is doing before deciding what you should do about it. If you appreciate health information that explains the mechanism instead of simply handing you a list of rules, consider staying with us. This is exactly what we do here. Take the complicated parts of aging, sleep, metabolism, and longevity, and explain them in a way that respects your intelligence without turning every health question into something frightening. There is no need to chase every new wellness trend. Sometimes the most useful answer is simply understanding what your body has been doing all along. And sleep is a perfect example. Because before we can understand what one missing night changes, we need to go back to the night itself and follow what happens as those hours of sleep disappear. Mechanism chain. What one missed night changes. To understand what one missing night does to you, start with what a normal night is actually doing. Sleep is not simply the period when your body shuts down. Across roughly 4 to 6 cycles, each lasting about 80 to 100 minutes, your brain moves through non-REM and REM sleep, with different patterns of brain activity, muscle tone, and physiology. During those cycles, your body is coordinating memory, hormones, autonomic regulation, metabolism, and other maintenance processes. When you remove a night from that sequence, the effects do not arrive as one dramatic event. They spread through connected systems. The first place you notice the change is often your brain. Sleep restriction affects networks in the prefrontal cortex, the area involved in attention, planning, judgment, and impulse control. That is why you can still perform a familiar task while feeling mentally slower, less focused, or strangely impatient. Your subjective feeling of tiredness and your objective performance are related, but they are not identical. You may underestimate how much your reaction time and attention have changed simply because being awake feels normal. And this is where it gets interesting. One reason is adenosine, a chemical involved in the biological pressure to sleep. As you remain awake, adenosine accumulates in the brain. Sleep helps clear that pressure. After a night spent awake, your brain is not merely short on energy, it is carrying a stronger biological signal that says, quite plainly, sleep. Caffeine can temporarily block some of adenosine's effects and make you feel more alert, but it does not replace the underlying functions of sleep. You can mask sleepiness without removing the sleep debt. Then another system enters the picture. Your circadian rhythm. This is your internal timing system, helping coordinate sleep, wakefulness, hormones, body temperature, and metabolism across roughly a 24-hour day. Cortisol, often called a stress hormone, normally follows a daily rhythm that helps prepare you for waking and activity. Sleep loss can alter aspects of that rhythm and increase stress-related signaling under some experimental conditions. It does not destroy cortisol. It changes the environment in which cortisol is being regulated. That matters because the brain, hormones, and cardiovascular system constantly communicate. A disrupted sleep period can make you feel more alert at the wrong time, more emotionally reactive, and less able to regulate ordinary stress. Some studies have also found changes in autonomic balance after one night without sleep, with greater sympathetic influence. The sympathetic nervous system is the part of your automatic nervous system that helps prepare you for action. In other words, after missing sleep, your body may spend more time in a state of readiness when it should be recovering. Now follow that signal into metabolism. Your cells need insulin to help move glucose from your bloodstream into tissues where it can be used for energy. Sleep restriction can temporarily reduce insulin sensitivity, meaning your cells may respond less efficiently to insulin. That does not mean one sleepless night gives you diabetes. It means the same meal can be handled under slightly different metabolic conditions after inadequate sleep. The distinction becomes important when the pattern repeats. One disrupted night can be temporary. Repeated nights of restricted sleep create repeated metabolic stress, and that is a very different biological situation. The same complexity appears with appetite. Sleep loss can influence ghrelin, leptin, and brain reward pathways, although popular explanations often make these hormones sound like simple switches. They are not. Research does not support the idea that every person responds identically, with ghrelin always rising and leptin always falling. What is clearer is that inadequate sleep can change appetite, food reward, and the way your brain responds to calorie-dense foods. Suddenly, the snack that normally requires a little restraint can feel unusually appealing. Your cardiovascular system is responding too. During healthy sleep, the balance of your autonomic nervous system shifts, generally allowing periods of reduced sympathetic activity. After acute sleep deprivation, studies have observed changes in heart rate regulation, autonomic balance, and, in some settings, blood pressure. One controlled study of 24 healthy volunteers found that after one night without sleep, participants felt more tired and their performance deteriorated, although several cardiovascular measures did not significantly change. That finding is important because it shows why careful science matters. Not every study finds the same response. And then there is the immune system. Sleep and immune signaling are closely connected, but this is another place where exaggerated claims cause confusion. Experimental sleep loss has been associated with changes in inflammatory and immune markers, but the pattern depends on how much sleep was lost, for how long, and which marker was measured. A study involving 40 hours of total sleep deprivation found changes in several inflammatory and immune signaling molecules, while a more recent meta-analysis found stronger evidence for inflammatory changes after multiple nights of partial sleep deprivation than after a single night. Put all of this together, and the picture becomes clearer. Missing one night does not create one single problem. It creates a temporary biological ripple. Altered attention can lead to poorer decisions. Increased sleep pressure can make alertness harder to maintain. Disrupted hormonal timing can influence stress. Metabolic sensitivity can shift. Appetite and reward can change. Autonomic regulation can respond. And immune signaling can move in subtle ways. Your body is not falling apart. It is adapting. That is the crucial distinction. And the fact that these systems are connected also explains why the morning after a sleepless night can feel so different even when nothing obvious has changed around you. The coffee is the same. The kitchen is the same. But the biology meeting you there is not. They try to overpower sleepiness with stimulation, irregular routines, and determination, without realizing their body may be asking for something much simpler instead. And this is where most people make the mistake, because when they finally reach that morning, they often respond to these biological changes in exactly the wrong way. Contrast frame and common mistake. That morning feels familiar because your first instinct is usually to fight the sleepiness. You reach for coffee before you have fully opened your eyes, move through breakfast on autopilot, and tell yourself you simply need to push through. There is nothing foolish about that response. Your brain is trying to restore alertness with whatever is immediately available. The problem begins when temporary compensation becomes the strategy for the entire day. The version most people follow is simple. Use more caffeine, move less because you feel exhausted, eat something highly rewarding for quick energy, and then stay awake until exhaustion finally forces you into bed. Sometimes you may even sleep unusually late the next morning, hoping to erase the entire deficit at once. But what your body actually needs is different. Caffeine is not the enemy. Used earlier in the day, it can improve alertness. The problem is timing and dose, especially when you keep adding caffeine late in the afternoon to overcome sleepiness. Caffeine can remain in your system for hours, potentially making it harder to fall asleep when you finally need rest. You may solve today's fatigue while quietly creating tomorrow's problem. The same principle applies to movement. Feeling tired can make you want to become completely sedentary, but normal daytime activity helps preserve the difference between being awake and being asleep. You do not need an intense workout. You need enough ordinary movement to keep your day recognizable to your circadian system. Food can create another trap. When sleep loss makes highly rewarding foods more appealing, reaching for sugar or heavily processed snacks can feel like a reasonable rescue. It may provide a brief lift, but it does not replace sleep or repair the underlying disruption. Most people fight sleepiness all day and then try to compensate chaotically at night. Your body is better served by something much simpler. Return to a normal daytime rhythm, protect the next night's sleep, and give recovery a chance to happen. And that distinction matters because one bad night is recoverable, but the way you respond can determine whether it remains one bad night or becomes part of a repeating cycle. Once you see that pattern, the problem may not be the missed night, but what you do afterward. But there is an even more important belief to correct before deciding what recovery should look like. Belief reframe. One bad night doesn't matter. But there is an even more important belief to correct before deciding what recovery should look like. The idea that one bad night simply does not matter. You have probably heard it for years. Everyone sleeps badly sometimes. You catch up later. Tomorrow will be fine. And there is some truth behind that reassurance. Your body is resilient, and acute sleep loss is generally something healthy systems can recover from. But recoverable does not mean irrelevant. That distinction is easy to miss. When a laboratory study measures changes in attention, insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, or inflammatory signaling after sleep loss, it is not automatically showing permanent damage. It is showing that the body responded. The research becomes especially useful when you stop treating all sleep loss as one category. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends that adults regularly obtain at least 7 hours of sleep per night, while acknowledging that individual needs vary. The National Institutes of Health also emphasizes that sleep supports brain function, physical health, emotional well-being, metabolism, and immune function. Controlled experiments make the picture more specific. Researchers have repeatedly found that restricting sleep can impair attention and cognitive performance, while metabolic studies have demonstrated temporary changes in insulin sensitivity following insufficient sleep. Other research has examined changes in autonomic activity and inflammatory signaling after acute sleep deprivation. None of this means that one difficult night has permanently damaged you. And this is the part almost nobody explains. Your body can be both affected and resilient at the same time. You can experience measurable physiological changes today and still recover tomorrow. Those statements are not contradictory. The mistake is assuming that nothing permanent happened means nothing happened at all. Think about it this way. A healthy body constantly responds to changes in temperature, food, exercise, stress, and sleep. A response is not necessarily an injury. Sometimes it is simply the body adjusting to circumstances and working to restore balance. That is why you do not need to panic after one poor night. You also do not need to dismiss it completely. If an occasional sleepless night happens, the useful response is not fear, it is understanding. And if poor sleep becomes frequent, persistent, or severe, that is different and worth discussing with a healthcare professional. You were never supposed to treat every bad night as a catastrophe, but you also were not meant to ignore what your biology is telling you. Once you understand that difference, the question becomes much more practical. So if your body has been disrupted, but is also capable of recovering, what should you actually do the morning after? Practical protocol: the recovery day. So if your body has been disrupted, but is also capable of recovering, the next step is surprisingly simple. Give your biology a normal day to work with. Start with light. Within the first hour after waking, if you can do so safely, spend about 10 to 30 minutes outdoors in natural daylight. You are not trying to cure sleep deprivation with sunlight. You are giving your circadian clock a strong daytime signal, helping reinforce the difference between morning and night. Then, hydrate normally. Drink according to thirst and your usual medical guidance. There is no reason to force large amounts of water simply because you slept badly. If you drink coffee or tea, keep it earlier in the day. Caffeine is not bad by itself. The problem is repeatedly using it to fight sleepiness into the afternoon when it can interfere with the next night's sleep. You want alertness without borrowing from tomorrow. Then, move gently. A comfortable 10 to 20-minute walk, if appropriate for you, can help keep your daytime routine intact. This is not the day for proving how tough you are. It is the day for restoring normal rhythm. And resist the temptation to spend the entire day in bed. If you truly need a nap, keep it relatively short and early enough that it does not steal sleep from the coming night. Most importantly, return to your usual bedtime rather than attempting an extreme sleep marathon. Your best recovery tool is not a supplement. It is the next opportunity for normal, sufficient sleep. If you have uncontrolled hypertension, significant heart disease or heart failure, kidney disease, diabetes, or another condition affecting fluids, exercise, or sleep, speak with your doctor about what is appropriate for you. And if you have severe daytime sleepiness, chest pain, fainting, breathing problems during sleep, or persistent insomnia, seek medical evaluation rather than treating it as an ordinary bad night. The goal is simple. Do not fight your biology. Give it the conditions it needs to recover. You are not trying to erase the night instantly. You are simply protecting the next 24 hours from becoming another disrupted cycle. That is a much more useful goal, and it is one your body can actually work with, without turning recovery into another source of stress or guilt. And now, return to the morning we began with, but look at it differently. Circular close. Think back to that morning we started with. You were standing in your kitchen, holding your coffee, feeling the heaviness behind your eyes, and wondering why everything seems slightly harder. Now you know what was happening. Your brain, hormones, metabolism, cardiovascular system, and immune system had all responded to the missing sleep. Not necessarily damaged, responding. And that changes the way you face the next morning. One bad night is not a sentence, but when poor sleep repeats, the pattern matters. Every single morning gives you another opportunity to protect your rhythm, potentially 365 times a year. The choice is no longer mysterious. You understand what your body is asking for, and that understanding gives you something much more useful than fear: a way forward. Soft CTA number 2. If this kind of explanation is useful to you, where we look at what your body is actually doing rather than simply repeating health advice, consider staying with the channel. That is what this channel is built around, helping you understand your biology with clarity, evidence, and respect.